Okay, let's unpack this. How does one person manage to become, well, a giant in both science and philosophy? I mean, really bridging centuries and cultures with their thought. It almost sounds like, something out of a legend, a figure maybe too vast to be real. But today, we're diving deep into the life and mind of a very real, very towering figure of the Middle Ages, Ibn Sina. A polymath whose influence, honestly, stretches across millennia. Just try to imagine the scene for a second. It's the 10th and 11th centuries. The Abbasid Caliphate, right? Its capital, Baghdad. It wasn't just a political center. It was this incredibly vibrant intellectual hub, a real crucible for knowledge. And people often call it the Islamic Golden Age, and for good reason. Think about Baghdad's House of Wisdom, a huge library, a translation center, scholars flocking there from all over. And it was here that Greek philosophy, especially Aristotle, his really intricate systematic stuff, wasn't just being translated into Arabic with amazing precision. No, it was being meticulously commented on, refined, systematized by these brilliant minds. You had these powerful currents, sometimes even conflicting ones, like Neoplatonism, with its whole hierarchy of being from the one, and then Aristotelianism, known for its super rigorous logic, its empiricism, its whole systematic way of understanding the natural world, all flowing together. And always, and this is crucial, these philosophical deep dives were shaped by and integrated with the bedrock of Islamic theological beliefs. It was dynamic, a real intellectual ecosystem. So our mission today is to take a deep dive into Ibn Sina, life, era, and philosophical system. We're going to try and extract the core insights, figure out why he was and frankly remains so incredibly important. We'll explore how he didn't just inherit these diverse traditions, but create this unique, really profound synthesis. He didn't just echo ideas, he fundamentally transformed them. And this influenced both Eastern and Western thought for centuries. You might even know his Latinized name, Avicenna. That name echoed in European universities for like 500 years.
It's true. And what's truly fascinating here is how Ibn Sina stands as one of the most significant intellectual figures, period. Not just within Islamic thought, where, yeah, his impact is absolutely foundational, but also as a decisive force in how Western philosophy itself developed. It's quite something. To really get a handle on his unprecedented impact, you absolutely have to understand the dynamic, the incredibly rich intellectual atmosphere of his time. He wasn't just some solitary genius working in a vacuum, right? He was a product of and a major, major contributor to this flourishing intellectual ecosystem that spanned continents and synthesized millennia of knowledge. His ability to synthesize, to systematize, and crucially, to innovate within this complex milieu. That's what truly sets him apart.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the incredible life story of this polymath. I mean, a man who accomplished so much, often seemingly against all odds, under circumstances that, let's be honest, would deter most of us from even finishing a single chapter, let alone monumental works. So Ibn Sina was born in 980 CE in Afshana, a village that's now part of modern-day Uzbekistan over in Central Asia. His father, Abdullah, he wasn't just anybody. He was a well-educated, respected administrator for the local Samana dynasty. So that definitely provided a kind of foundational environment of learning, of intellectual curiosity for young Ibn Sina. And from childhood, apparently, he just demonstrated this absolutely extraordinary ability to learn. A prodigious intellect, clear to everyone around him. We're talking about someone who, at a remarkably young age, like before his teens, had already memorized the entire Quran, mastered Arabic, delved deep into logic, math, natural sciences. He wasn't just learning, he was devouring knowledge, absorbing vast amounts of information, apparently with astonishing speed and retention, like a sponge in an ocean of books.
Yeah. The stories of his early learning are just legendary. Almost hard to believe, but consistently reported.
And this child prodigy, he quickly transitioned into becoming an accomplished physician, a calling that would bring him immense fame, but also really practical experience. He started specializing in medicine and philosophy pretty early on, which says a lot about his sheer intellectual capacity, right?
Yeah.
And his drive to not just understand the world, but maybe also to heal it. But what's truly astonishing, almost unbelievable, is that he started practicing as a doctor at just 16. 16.
Just imagine that.
Yeah. A teenager, successfully diagnosing, treating complex illnesses, often apparently baffling older, more experienced doctors. And this early success, despite his youth, it didn't just build his reputation, it opened significant doors for him. Suddenly, he's getting opportunities as a physician and advisor in the prominent courts of the era, like the Samanids, the Buyids.
Right, he became part of the elite, sought after for this, well, unparalleled medical knowledge. Consulted by emirs, viziers. There's that famous story where he cured the Samanid prince Nu ibn Mansur, an illness that had stumped all the other court physicians.
Ah, yes, and that cure granted him basically unparalleled access to the royal library, didn't it?
Exactly, a treasure trove of rare manuscripts, which must have just poured fuel on his already insatiable thirst for knowledge.
Absolutely. But his life wasn't just, cozy scholarship and court appointments and healing the sick. Not at all.
Yeah.
It was deeply, deeply intertwined with the intense political turmoil and instability of his time. The Islamic states back then were frequently locked in these interstate conflicts, dynastic struggles, power vacuums. Palace intrigues were just a constant, dangerous backdrop.
A very precarious existence, even for someone in his position.
Totally. So consequently, Ibn Sina's life was just punctuated by repeated migrations, moving from city to city, often fleeing instability. He even faced periods of imprisonment due to shifting political loyalties, or maybe rivalries, and exiles too. It really is an illustrative point to consider. How could someone maintain such an incredible intellectual focus? How do you write monumental works like the Canon of Medicine or the Book of Healing, develop this incredibly comprehensive philosophical system amidst such profound personal danger and political chaos?
It really tells you something profound about his dedication, his almost superhuman discipline, and perhaps, his ability to find solace, find order within the serene, timeless world of ideas, even when his external world was just utter chaos.
Yeah, like a philosopher king, but often without a kingdom, just moving with his vast mental library.
That's a good way to put it.
Towards the end of his life, after all those years of restless movement, he eventually settled down for a bit in Isfahan and later Hamadan in modern-day Iran. And here, despite all the hardships, the constant threat of upheaval he'd endured, he just kept writing prolifically on medicine, on philosophy, refining his grand system. He finally passed away in Hamadan in 1037 CE. He was 57. Which, considering his output, feels young, doesn't it?
It does. An incredibly dense 57 years.
But his death was really just the beginning of his posthumous impact. His works weren't just widely read and debated in the Islamic world for centuries. They also quickly found their way to Europe through meticulous Latin translations. And they just started to reshape Western thought for, well, half a millennium.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, his turbulent life, it really didn't seem to deter his intellectual pursuits. In fact, you could argue it perhaps sharpened his perspective somehow, forced him to synthesize vast amounts of knowledge under these incredibly challenging circumstances. Imagine, like you said, carrying your entire library in your head, basically, constantly adapting, refining ideas while on the run, maybe even from a prison cell.
Wow.
And this early exposure to such diverse fields, medicine, math, logic, philosophy, often learned at that astonishingly young age. It really laid the groundwork for his incredibly comprehensive philosophical system. He wasn't just good at one thing, right? He was a master of many. And critically, he built this interconnected framework of knowledge, spanning all these disciplines. He saw them as parts of a unified whole. And that allowed for a truly robust, resilient system of thought.
Okay, so what does this all mean then for the philosophical context he was operating in? Where did he fit into that grand intellectual tapestry of his time? And how did he manage to be both, a synthesizer and a revolutionary? Well, Ibn Sina's era, it's universally considered the classical period of Islamic philosophy. During this time, the philosophical debates, they largely centered on this monumental intellectual task, harmonizing the profound, often complex thought of Aristotle with the core tenets of Islamic theology. And this wasn't just a simple translation job. It was a deeply intellectual, theological challenge.
Absolutely. How do you reconcile a created universe affirmed by Scripture with Aristotle's idea of an eternal world, for instance, or divine providence and free will with a rigorous system of cause and effect? These were huge questions.
Exactly. Philosophers wrestled with them, trying to integrate Aristotle's logical rigor, his systematic approach, into an Islamic worldview that affirmed this singular omnipotent God. But he didn't start from scratch, did he? Or work totally alone. There was a giant before him, whose shoulders he really stood on.
Ah, you mean Al-Farabi.
Precisely. Abu Nasr al-Farabi, often called the second teacher, right after Aristotle himself. Farabi was this truly great philosopher who had already meticulously introduced Aristotle's logic, natural philosophy, metaphysics into Arab culture. He laid so much of the foundational groundwork.
He really did, setting the stage for systematic philosophical inquiry in the Islamic world.
So Ibn Sina took Farabi's already sophisticated system, deepened it considerably, clarified a lot of ambiguities, and then developed his own entirely original philosophical framework. He wasn't just a commentator on Farabi or Aristotle. He was an innovator. He pushed the boundaries of existing thought, creating this new, more comprehensive, often more rigorous system.
Which is a crucial distinction. He respected his predecessors, but wasn't bound by them.
Right. And in this period, Islamic philosophy focused on several key areas, and Ibn Sina just made profound contributions to each one. First, there was metaphysics, grappling with fundamental concepts, being the nature of God, that crucial distinction between necessary and possible existence. That was really the queen of sciences for him.
The absolute foundation.
Then epistemology, exploring the source and limits of human knowledge, meticulously defining the roles of reason, the senses, how do we know what we know, how can we be certain. Natural philosophy was another major area, thinkers investigating the structure of the universe, motion, causality, change in the physical world. Basically, physics and cosmology today.
Understanding the created order.
And finally, the philosophy of the soul, delving into the very nature of the soul itself, its immortality, its different faculties, its really intricate relationship with the body. And Ibn Sina didn't just, participate in these discussions. He brought unique, groundbreaking interpretations, systematic analyses to each area. His contributions, especially in metaphysics and epistemology, didn't just add to the discourse. They profoundly shaped the subsequent development of both Islamic philosophy, setting entirely new directions for thought in the East for centuries, and Western philosophy, influencing thinkers who came much later in Europe. He created a kind of universal intellectual grammar.
And this is precisely where his genius lies. It does raise that important question. How did he manage to synthesize such diverse, often seemingly contradictory traditions? Greek philosophy, Aristotle, Neoplatonism with the core tenets of Islamic theology? It's remarkable. He wasn't just translating texts or passively receiving ideas. He was actively building upon them, refining, innovating, creating a truly coherent, comprehensive system.
Real balancing act.
Yeah, he integrated these often disparate systems into this holistic whole, creating a philosophy that was both deeply rational and profoundly spiritual. He really stands as one of the most mature, most sophisticated examples of this grand synthesis. And that, critically, is what made his work so incredibly influential downstream. It became a foundational text, a reference point for generations of philosophers across different cultures, different religious traditions. His work became a common intellectual currency.
Okay, let's really unpack this core concept then. What did Ibn Sina mean by being? Now, I know it might sound abstract, maybe a topic only for, ivory tower philosophers. But for Ibn Sina, it's the absolute cornerstone of his entire philosophical system, the bedrock. Everything else is built on it, from understanding God to knowing ourselves.
It truly is central. You can't understand him without getting this.
So at its heart is the concept of being, or wujud, in Arabic. He defined it pretty simply as the fact of something being. Just that something exists. But crucially, he saw being as multi-layered, something understood at different levels, possessing different degrees. It's not flat, not uniform, where everything just is in the same way.
No, existence itself is more like a rich tapestry, different modes, different intensities.
Exactly. Which leads us to his truly revolutionary distinction, a groundbreaking approach in ontology, the study of being, the separation of being, wujud, from quiddity, mahiyya. Okay, think of it this way. Quiddity is what something is. Its essence, its nature, its whatness. So the quiddity of a horse is to be a horse, right? It embodies all the essential characteristics that make something a horse. This essence, this horseness, it's unchanging.
It defines what it is to be a horse, regardless of whether any particular horse actually exists.
You can conceive of a unicornness, it's unicorn quiddity, even if, sadly, no unicorns actually exist. Then you have being, wujud, which is that something exists, its actual existence, its concrete presence in reality. So the being of a horse is that it actually exists, trotting in field right here, right now, in reality.
The fact of its existence, separate from its definition.
Precisely. And the key point here is that quiddity and being are separate concepts for Ibn Sina. Things quiddity, its essence, that doesn't change. But its being, its existence, well, that's contingent. It depends on whether it exists under certain conditions or if it's brought into existence by something else. And this seemingly simple distinction, it was immensely important in Islamic metaphysics because it allowed philosophers to rigorously talk about essences that could exist even if they don't, and to differentiate between the nature of a thing and its actual existence. It just opened up entirely new ways for ontological inquiry. Incredibly influential.
It really did. It allowed for much more nuanced discussions about general versus specific states of being, and particularly about the nature of God in relation to creation. What's fascinating here is precisely how this distinction allowed for these incredibly complex ontological discussions, especially regarding God and created things. Like you said, it allows for essences that might not currently exist, like that unicorn, or even essences that can't possibly exist, like a square circle, which has quiddity but no possible being at all.
Right, right.
This separation gave philosophers this powerful new tool to analyze existence itself with a level of precision that was, well, unprecedented. It became the bedrock for understanding how God, as a necessary being, relates to the contingent world of possible beings, without necessarily implying a direct, unmediated creation of every single essence.
Okay, so if everything has a quiddity and a being, how did he categorize existence itself within this grand scheme?
Mm.
He didn't just stop there. He went further, offering two fundamental, overarching classifications of being. These underpin his entire metaphysical system.
The big division.
Yeah. First, he posited the necessary being, wajib al-wujud. This is a being whose existence is self-derived. Its essence is its existence. Its existence is inherent to its very nature. It exists by itself, dependent on nothing else. And its non-existence is simply inconceivable. It's impossible for it not to exist. This, for Ibn Sina, is God.
Uncaused. Self-sufficient.
Exactly. God's existence is absolutely necessary. No contingency, no external cause, no prior condition needed for God to be. Then second, we have possible being, mumkin al-wujud. This category basically encompasses everything else, anything that does not exist by itself. Its existence is not inherent to its essence, so its existence is dependent on another being to bring it into actualization.
Contingent.
Right. Essentially, all beings in the universe we experience, from an atom to a galaxy, a rock to a human being, they all fall into this category. They can exist or they cannot exist. Their existence is contingent. And crucially, these possible beings, they originate from the necessary being. They derive their existence from
They
it.
need something else to give them existence.
Precisely. And this ontological distinction between necessary being and possible being, it's the most fundamental principle for uniting the concept of God in Islamic theology with philosophy. It provided this powerful rational argument for divine existence. According to Ibn Sina, the necessary being is also the first cause.
The ultimate source.
Yes. The ultimate reason, the ultimate source, the ultimate ground for the existence of all other beings in the cosmos. Every possible being, because it doesn't have to exist, must have a cause that actualizes its existence.
Right.
And this chain of causes, it must ultimately lead back to something whose existence is uncaused and self-sufficient, the necessary being.
Otherwise, you get infinite regress.
Exactly. It's a truly elegant solution to a profound philosophical and theological problem. A logical necessity, really, for the universe to exist at all.
And this point about causality and contingency is absolutely central and profoundly influential. It does raise that important question about infinite regress. If everything possible needs a cause to bring it into existence because, by definition, it doesn't have to exist, then ultimately there must be something necessary that doesn't need a cause.
Right. The buck has to stop somewhere.
Precisely. Otherwise, you're left with this endless, ungrounded chain of contingent causes, which is philosophically unsustainable. This argument, articulated so powerfully, so systematically by Ibn Sina, became a crucial and enduring argument for the existence of God in philosophical traditions across the globe, influencing thinkers for centuries, East and West. Most notably, perhaps, Thomas Aquinas' Third Way.
Ah, yes, Aquinas. Direct line there. And he didn't just stop at these two fundamental types of being. He saw intricate layers within existence itself, adding even more nuance, more richness to his metaphysics, creating a kind of cosmological hierarchy.
Degrees of being.
Exactly. Ibn Sina's ontology posits that being at its core is a unity. It all emanates from the singular necessary being. However, within this fundamental unity, there are distinct degrees of existence. It's not flat, more like a magnificent spectrum or a grand chain of being. So, for example, God, the necessary being, is absolute unity, perfect simplicity, resides at the highest, most complete level of being, perfect, singular existence. Essence is existence. But as existence emanates from God, it becomes progressively less unified, more composite, and thus exists at a lower degree of being.
Further from the source, more complex.
Right. Human existence, for instance, is less unified compared to the divine. It comprises both material, the body, and spiritual, the soul, elements, making it a lower, more complex composite form of being compared to the pure, simple unity of the divine. You could also think of the degrees maybe going from pure intellects, like angels in his system,
Right, the intelligence is...
down to celestial bodies, then earthly beings, animals, plants, minerals, each possessing a lesser degree of perfection and unity as they move further from the necessary being.
It's a hierarchy of perfection in a sense.
Yeah, and this idea allows us to understand being not just as a simple to exist, but as degrees of existence, a richer, more descriptive concept reflecting a graded reality. The result is that being transcends a static, one-dimensional concept. It emerges instead as this dynamic, flowing, multi-layered reality, with everything ultimately rooted in and sustained by the necessary being. It's a profound shift in how we might conceive of what it means for something to be, connecting all existence in this coherent system.
And this concept of graded being, or emanation as it's often called, it's crucial because it allows for a more nuanced understanding of creation and divine providence. Everything from the most abstract intellects down to the simplest stone descends from that ultimate unified, necessary being. As things emanate, move further away from that ultimate source, they become less unified, more composites, exist at a lower degree of being, acquiring multiple qualities, forms. It's a cosmological framework that connects all existence back to a singular, perfect origin, explaining the diversity we see in the world without compromising the absolute unity and perfection of God. It provides a kind of blueprint for understanding the interconnectedness of everything in the cosmos.
Okay, so if metaphysics is what is the nature of reality, then epistemology is the how we know what is, the journey of human knowledge. And Ibn Sina had this highly original, profoundly systematic take on this crucial question, laying out a really precise pathway for understanding.
Yeah, his theory of knowledge is definitely one of the most original systematic parts of his philosophy, not just a collection of ideas, but a carefully constructed framework.
He proposed that knowledge acquisition unfolds in three fundamental progressive stages, building one meticulously upon the other, moving from the concrete to the abstract, particular to universal.
A clear progression.
First stage, sensory perception, all hiss. This is the initial point, right? Raw data from the external world received through our five external senses. Sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell, is the most basic interaction with reality, the immediate apprehension of individual objects, their qualities. Humans directly perceive the world through these senses.
But for Ibn Sina, that's just the start. Sensory perception alone isn't true knowledge. It provides the raw material, but not the understanding itself.
Exactly. Stage two, imagination. Wow. This also incorporates what he called internal senses, common sense, retentive imagination, compositive imagination, estimative power, a whole suite of faculties. Here, the sensory data isn't just passively received. It's mentally shaped, organized, processed into images, phantasms.
Stored and manipulated.
Right. Sensory information is combined, compared, remembered, new images are formed. Think about recalling the vivid image of a specific horse you saw yesterday, even though you're not looking at it now.
Or imagining a horse with wings, even if you've never seen one.
Perfect example. That's the imagination at work. Processing, manipulating sensory input, storing it, recombining it. This stage moves beyond immediate perception to internal representation, retention. Then the final and highest stage of knowledge, reason, AQL. This is where the magic truly happens for Ibn Sina, the pinnacle of human cognitive ability.
The intellectual faculty.
Yes, from the images and particular concepts formed by the senses and imagination. The rational faculty abstracts general and universal concepts. It strips away all the material accidents, the particularities. Reason then combines these abstract concepts, forms judgments, draws inferences, constructs arguments to attain certain definitive knowledge.
Moving from the particular to the universal.
Exactly. It's through reason that we move beyond individual perceptions to grasp universal truths, to understand principles, to arrive at scientific and philosophical insights. Like seeing many individual horses lets the imagination form the image of horse, but it's reason that extracts the universal concept of horseness or animal, which applies to all horses past, present, future.
A crucial step.
So for Ibn Sina, reason is the ultimate stage of knowledge acquisition. He effectively adopted what we might call a dual epistemological approach. He's both an empiricist and a rationalist.
Which sounds contradictory, but he makes it work.
Right.
Yeah.
What it means in practice is that knowledge begins through the senses we need, that raw sensory input to start the process, ground our understanding in the external world, but it's truly finalized and made certain, brought to its highest, most abstract, universal form through the rigorous application of reason. It's a complete journey, from raw data to profound, certain understanding. A continuous upward movement from material apprehension to intellectual grasp.
And that reconciliation is a remarkable feat. It does raise that important question. How does he reconcile these seemingly disparate sources, sensory experience, and abstract reason? He creates this clear, logical pathway, a very precise progression where one builds upon the other, leading to complete, certain understanding. It's not one or the other, but this profound synthesis where the empirical feeds the rational, and the rational clarifies and perfects the empirical. He shows how our minds can move from observing a single tree to understanding the universal concept of treeness, bridging that gap between particulars and universals, and ultimately allowing us to grasp even metaphysical truths.
But he didn't limit knowledge just to what we perceive and reason through these three stages, did he? He had a broader view, more expansive.
Right, he included more intuitive or spiritual dimensions too.
He detailed various types of knowledge, extending beyond just purely mental or intellectual comprehension. This included not just reasoned knowledge, but also forms of intuition, like immediate apprehension of logical necessity or self-evident truths, and even this concept of inner illumination, which is fascinating.
It's illumination, yeah. The soul's direct connection with the active intellect.
Exactly. The active intellect, this universal, immaterial intelligence in his cosmology, the source of all universal forms and concepts. He firmly believed the human soul possesses the inherent capacity to reach absolute knowledge, to grasp fundamental, universal truths, even divine truths.
But, and this is the crucial caveat, right, it requires effort.
Absolutely. It grounds his philosophy in human effort. He emphasized that this profound access, this ultimate illumination, is only possible through dedicated education, rigorous intellectual effort, and spiritual purification. It's not just handed to you. It's something you must strive for, a journey of continuous cultivation, intellect, and soul.
It truly emphasizes a holistic approach to knowing, acknowledging the empirical, the rational, and the more profound, intuitive, even spiritual aspects of understanding, aspects that can be cultivated through discipline, rigorous study. It's a very active, engaged view of the learner, highlighting that true knowledge is this lifelong journey of continuous effort and development across all faculties of the soul, culminating potentially in a deeper connection to universal truths.
Okay, so beyond how we know, there's the how we think, the very structure of reasoning itself. And Ibn Sina rigorously refined the tools for clear thought, specifically logic, making it not just academic, but a practical method for attaining truth.
Yeah, he significantly developed Aristotelian logic. Didn't just adopt it, he built on it, systematized it, clarified its nuances in ways that were hugely influential later on.
And for him, logic wasn't just a formal system, right? Like abstract rules learned in a classroom, detached from reality.
Not at all. He viewed it as a practical, essential tool, the organon, the instrument of all knowledge. It was the means by which the human mind could ensure accurate, effective mental processes, moving from known premises to sound, certain conclusions.
So logic enables the mind to systematically reach correct knowledge, avoid fallacies, construct coherent arguments.
Exactly. He wrote extensively on logic, made it a foundational part of his curriculum for students, believed that without proper logical training, you couldn't truly engage in philosophy or science effectively.
Makes sense. And he also delved deep into the relationship between words and concepts. Philosophy of language.
The interplay between language and thought was key for him. He considered language both an outward expression of thought, the main way our internal ideas manifest externally, get communicated, and critically, a fundamental means of transmitting knowledge, from person to person, generation to generation.
And the connection between language, structure, and logic was important.
Critically important in his logical framework. He recognized that unclear language often leads to unclear thinking. Precise language is essential for precise thought and for effectively communicating truth. It's how thoughts are formed, communicated, understood with precision, ensuring that whole knowledge journey from sensory input to rational certainty can actually be shared.
That shows his practical side again. Logic isn't just academic gymnastics for him.
Not at all. It's the very scaffolding upon which sound reasoning and effective knowledge transfer are built. Without that structure, the mind can't properly process the being it perceives, nor can it clearly articulate its understandings and share them. It's the essential structure for intellectual clarity, a vital prerequisite for any scientific or philosophical endeavor.
Like having the tools and blueprints to build a stable structure of thought.
Precisely. A great analogy.
Okay, so from the abstract to the concrete. How did he see the physical world, the cosmos around us? He built on established frameworks, Aristotle again, but gave them that unique theologically informed twist.
Yeah, his natural philosophy, his understanding of the physical world, it's based on Aristotle's framework of physics cosmology. But crucially, he didn't just copy it. He rigorously reinterpreted it, adapted it specifically in light of Islamic beliefs, integrating scientific observation with theological truths about creation, divine sustenance.
That was key, wasn't it? Harmonizing Greek philosophy with Islamic revelation.
Absolutely essential for his project.
So he accepted the ancient Greek idea, popularized by Aristotle, of the four fundamental elements: earth, water, air, fire.
Yes, that was standard cosmology then.
And when it came to understanding change, motion, generation in the physical world, he used Aristotle's four causes.
That's right. The four causes provided that comprehensive framework for understanding why anything exists and changes.
Right, the material cause, the stuff something's made of, marble for a statue. The formal cause, the form, shape, blueprint, the statue's design.
The essence.
The efficient cause,
Yeah,
the agent or force bringing it about, the sculptor.
the mover.
And the final cause, the purpose, the goal, why the statue was made, maybe to honor someone.
Teleological cause, yeah. For Ibn Sina, these four causes explained a thing's existence, its changes, its dynamics, its ultimate purpose, became fundamental tenets of philosophical and scientific thought for ages.
But importantly, and this distinguishes him from some Greeks, for Ibn Sina, the universe is unequivocally God's creation, right?
Absolutely. Unlike Aristotle, who believed in the eternity of the universe, Ibn Sina affirmed it has a beginning in time, an initial act of creation.
And God doesn't just create it and leave it.
No, God ensures its continuous existence and operation through an ongoing act of sustenance, emanation. The universe is constantly dependent on God for its very being.
So this beginning is rooted fundamentally in God, the necessary being. It's a created, sustained order, reflecting divine design, purposeful action.
Like an intricate clockwork, constantly wound and maintained by its divine architect. That's a good image for it.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you see that consistent thread again, right?
Yeah, reconciling rational inquiry with profound theological understanding, it runs through everything. He provides this robust framework for understanding the physical world, its components, changes, laws, in a way that doesn't contradict divine creation. It actually explains its mechanisms, its inherent purpose, through rational means.
So it's a comprehensive view, integrating physics with metaphysics, science and faith coexisting harmoniously in one grand system.
Exactly. His model allowed for both systematic scientific investigation of nature and a profound appreciation for its divine origin and continuous sustenance.
Okay, now for perhaps one of his most fascinating, most debated areas, and certainly one that's resonated through centuries of philosophy and religion.
Yeah.
What did he believe about the soul? It's core to his understanding of us, human beings, and our place in the cosmos.
Definitely a central and hugely influential part of his thought.
He argued, quite distinctively for his time, that the soul is entirely distinct from matter, completely separate in its essence from the physical body, and crucially, immortal.
An immaterial substance, not just a property of the body.
Right. He posited the human soul is this immaterial substance. It possesses the innate capacities of reason and thought, the very faculties we use to acquire knowledge, understand the world. And through these rational capacities, the soul can approach God, apprehend universal truths, grasp absolute knowledge, like we discussed with epistemology.
So the soul isn't just an emergent property of bodily functions. It's fundamental, enduring, exists prior to and survives the body.
He had that famous flying man argument, didn't he?
Yes, the thought experiment. If a person were created in a void, unable to sense their body, they'd still be aware of their own self, their own existence, proving the soul's independent existence from the body and senses.
A clever argument. And he viewed the soul as the very core of life and consciousness, the animating principle.
Exactly. The fundamental entity that governs all bodily functions, digestion, movement, and provides vitality, sensation, consciousness to the organism. It's what makes the body alive.
So death, in this framework, is simply when the soul separates from the body, stops animating it.
Precisely. But the soul itself, being immaterial and independent, is immortal. It continues its existence even without the body. A concept that, well, profoundly shaped later discussions about the afterlife, human destiny, across different traditions.
And he also detailed various levels and functions of the soul, a kind of psychological model.
Yes, a very sophisticated one. He spoke of three main layers, or faculties.
The vegetative soul, responsible for nourishment, growth, reproduction, common to all living things.
Basic life functions.
The animal soul, responsible for sensation, perception, voluntary movement, found in animals and humans.
Higher functions, interacting with the world.
And the rational soul, unique to humans, the highest faculty, capable of abstract thought, intellectual apprehension, moral choice.
The seat of reason.
And within the animal and rational souls, he detailed even more specific internal senses and faculties, like common sense, imagination, memory, estimation.
Yes, a very detailed breakdown. Through this layered approach, he attempted to explain how human consciousness is shaped. from basic sensation and emotion up to complex reasoning and the highest forms of intellectual and spiritual contemplation.
Wow. What's fascinating is the sheer sophistication of that psychological model he developed, exploring the whole spectrum of human experience.
It really is, and it raises that important question. How does this immortal, immaterial soul interact with the mortal material body? He presented a clear, detailed framework for this intricate relationship, not just a simple joining, but a reciprocal influence. Soul directs body, body provides raw material for the soul's operations.
Oh, I see.
And this model profoundly influenced later thought, both Islamic and Western, providing a foundational approach to grappling with the enduring mind-body problem, understanding the human being as this composite of physical and spiritual realities.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly, though it's all connected with him.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the area where his impact is maybe most tangible, most widely known, profoundly felt even today, medicine.
Ah, yes, the
Yeah.
canon. His medical contributions alone would have secured his place in history, a true titan.
His monumental work, Al-Qanon Fit-Tib, known in the West as the Canon of Medicine. It's considered maybe the most concrete, enduring example of his intellectual legacy. This colossal 5-volume treatise wasn't just another medical text. It was systematic, encyclopedic, a masterpiece. It served as the fundamental textbook for medical education for centuries, not just in the Islamic world, but extensively throughout Europe.
Its influence persisted for over 600 years, well into the early modern period. Translated into Latin, formed the core curriculum in European universities until the 17th century. It's staggering.
600 years. Imagine a single book being the authoritative medical guide for half a millennium. Unbelievable.
Truly remarkable staying power.
And the book itself was so systematically comprehensive, meticulously covered anatomy of the body's structure, physiology, how the body functions, the precise definition and classification of countless diseases, often with groundbreaking accuracy for the time.
And practical, detailed treatment methods, including pharmacology, surgery.
Yeah, Ibn Sina extensively examined the causes, symptoms, treatment processes of illnesses, showing this incredibly deep, nuanced understanding. Like, he accurately described meningitis, right? The difference between mediastinitis and pleurisy, the contagious nature of diseases like TB.
Yes, many specific clinical observations that were remarkably advanced. He also strongly advocated for observation, clinical diagnosis, even explored the effects of emotion on physical health. Psychosomatics, essentially.
So his medical understanding was both rigorously observational, based on empirical evidence, clinical practice from his own extensive experience as a physician, and deeply theoretical, integrating his philosophical principles, causality, the elements, the soul.
Exactly, which is why Al-Qanun wasn't just a collection of remedies or a practical guide. It was a profound scientific work integrated within his broader philosophical system, a true testament to his holistic approach to knowledge. Medicine wasn't just a craft, it was a true science for him.
And that raises the important question you touched on. How did his philosophical background, natural philosophy, understanding of the soul, how did that inform his medical practice?
Well, it allowed him to see the human body and disease not just as isolated phenomena, but as parts of a larger interconnected system. A living entity whose physical, mental, even spiritual aspects were all intertwined.
The whole person.
Precisely. He understood disease as an imbalance within this system, informed by his broader understanding of causality and the elements. His work, the Canon, it wasn't just a collection of remedies. It was this systematic encyclopedia that organized medical knowledge like never before, providing a rational framework for understanding health and disease. It became the gold standard for half a millennium, precisely because of its comprehensive nature, its systematic organization, and its integration of theoretical understanding with practical application. It truly transformed medical education and practice across cultures.
So what does this all mean then for his lasting impact? How did this genius from 1,000 years ago continue to shape our world, leave such an indelible mark that his ideas still resonate today?
Well, his philosophy continued to exert profound influence for centuries after his death. In the Islamic world, his works weren't just read, they were intensely interpreted, debated, taught extensively in madrasas, intellectual circles.
He became central for later Islamic philosophers and scholars.
Absolutely. Figures like Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, they either built upon or critically engaged with his system. His philosophical school, often called Avicennism, really dominated Islamic intellectual life for centuries, shaped discourse on metaphysics, logic, epistemology.
But the impact wasn't just confined to the East, was it?
Not at all. His works reached Western Europe through those diligent Latin translations starting around the 12th century, mainly out of Toledo in Spain, that vibrant translation center.
And these translations transformed the intellectual landscape of Europe.
They really did, making him one of the fundamental sources for the scholastic philosophers who were then beginning to shape European thought.
Scholasticism. That's the dominant method in medieval European universities, right?
Yeah,
Rigorous logic, integrating Aristotle with Christian theology.
exactly. And specifically, in the 12th and 13th centuries, towering figures like Albert the Great and his famous pupil Thomas Aquinas,
Aquinas, yeah. Foundational for Catholic thought.
and Roger Bacon, a pioneer in scientific method. They were directly, profoundly influenced by Ibn Sina's metaphysical and epistemological views. They didn't just read him, they critically engaged with his ideas, often adopting and adapting his concepts into their own philosophical and theological systems.
Like his concepts of being and necessary being.
Yeah.
You mentioned Aquinas' third way.
Precisely. Those became crucial arguments for the philosophical proof of God's existence in Western theology, demonstrating a direct lineage of thought right across civilizations. It's quite stunning.
And the relevance doesn't even stop there, even in modern philosophy.
Yeah. It's true. Even today, Ibn Sina's ideas are being reevaluated, reconsidered by contemporary scholars. His profound contributions to ontology, the study of being, and epistemology, the theory of knowledge, they remain fundamental elements, still referenced, analyzed in contemporary metaphysical studies, philosophical debates on existence, consciousness, knowledge.
So he's not just a historical figure stuck in ancient texts.
Not at all. His ideas continue to resonate, contribute to ongoing philosophical discussions about fundamental questions that transcend time and culture.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Ibn Sina's role as a bridge between the intellectual traditions of East and West.
Okay.
It's just undeniable, remarkable.
Absolutely. He didn't just transmit knowledge, he transformed it, refining, innovating upon existing ideas to create this universal language for philosophical inquiry that transcended cultural, religious boundaries. His ability to synthesize such diverse streams of thought allowed for a truly global exchange of ideas, making him the central figure in the intellectual history of humanity. He demonstrated that intellectual rigor and spiritual insight aren't mutually exclusive. They can, in fact, enrich each other, providing a comprehensive framework for understanding reality.
What an incredible journey into the life and mind of Ibn Sina. He truly developed such deep knowledge, profound understanding of both philosophy and medicine, creating this holistic intellectual system without ever really separating these two fields. He saw them as fundamentally interconnected, didn't he?
Yes, parts of a single grand pursuit of truth.
An approach that really stands in stark contrast to so much of today's hyper-specialization. His metaphysical thought, systematically, originally analyzing the very nature of being, that groundbreaking distinction between quiddity and existence, classifying existence into necessary and possible beings, a conceptual leap that influenced philosophy for centuries. Simultaneously, this epistemology revealing the fundamental processes of human knowledge, from sensory perception to the pinnacle of reason, emphasizing both empirical input and rational certainty as essential.
A complete picture.
Yeah. His profound contributions to the philosophy of the soul, its relationship with the body, his comprehensive natural philosophy harmonizing ancient wisdom with theological insight, and of course his monumental impact on medicine through the canon. It just cements him as one of the greatest figures in both philosophy and scientific history, a true polymath whose intellectual curiosity just knew no bounds.
And this raises, I think, an important question for you, the listener, to ponder. In an age like ours, where knowledge is increasingly specialized, fragmented into silos, what can we truly learn from Ibn Sina's holistic approach to understanding reality, where science, philosophy, spirituality weren't seen as separate domains, but as interconnected facets of a single, unified pursuit of truth?
That's a great question.
His works, his ideas, they were interpreted, built upon across vastly different civilizations, demonstrating a vision far beyond his own time, his own culture. Understanding Ibn Sina means delving into the depths of both Islamic philosophy and the general history of philosophy itself, recognizing the profound interconnectedness of human thought across millennia. Perhaps his legacy reminds us that true breakthroughs often happen at the intersection of disciplines, when we dare to look for the connections that others might miss.
So, the next time you encounter a complex problem, maybe, or find yourself struggling to connect seemingly disparate pieces of information, perhaps think of Ibn Sina. Consider how different fields of knowledge, seemingly isolated, might actually connect and integrate to unlock a deeper, more holistic understanding. Until next time, Keep diving deep.